Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. It is Tuesday, October 4th. I'm Charlie Eisenhood. He is Josh Mansfield. And we are rocking and rolling in USDGC week, Throw Pink week, Rock Hill. It's coming up. The weather's been horrendous on the East Coast for a few days, but it's going to be gorgeous in Rock Hill during the week. So looking forward to heading down there and enjoying some high 70s temperatures and sunshine. And we're going to start breaking some stuff down today. And of course, we'll be back with you first thing early Thursday morning with our preview show. Josh, hello. And how was your weekend?
It was good, Charlie. I got to spend some time at my grandparents' house and go play some disc golf at a course I don't usually get to play. So always a nice weekend. Just very, very relaxing, which always nice.
I know. I had a very relaxing weekend as well. Just getting ready for a busy October as we got a lot of disc golf coming up here, and we get a weekend off. There's no tournament. I mean, like,
no.
It's so weird to come into a Tuesday show and not have a tournament to discuss. So we're going to begin today with some news that dropped kind of right after our Thursday show last week, which is the 2023 Disc Golf Pro Tour schedule getting announced. Mm-hmm. So we have the full Elite Series and Major calendar for next year, along with probably what's about 75 to 80% of the Silver Series events that will be on the calendar. The Silver events. They're no longer Silver Series. It's just Silver. Mm-hmm. So note that. I'm just going to run through really quick the schedule and, kind of broad strokes here. So first and foremost, it looks a lot like 2022. There are some changes. We'll discuss all of those. Here is your schedule. In Arizona, late February, we'll have All-Star Weekend, exhibition event to kick things off as it was this year. Then we'll go to the Las Vegas Challenge last weekend in February. On to Waco, March 10th through 12th. Then we'll have the Open at Austin, a new Elite Series event, a week after that. Texas State Championships will be a silver event this year, end of March. We'll go to the Music City Open in Nashville. That was formerly a national tour event. Last year it was a silver event, and now it is back on the Elite Series. Then we'll go to the Blue Ridge Championships at the North Cove course in North Carolina. That's where the college championships will be this year and were last year as well. Highly regarded course. That will be a silver event. Then we'll have our first major of the year at the Champions Cup, late April. Jonesboro last weekend in April. And then on to OTB Open out in California, second weekend in May. Beaver State Fling will be a silver again mid-May. And then we will have our first Elite Plus event, the Portland Open. More on that in a little bit. That'll be the last weekend in May over Memorial Day. And then we'll go to the Dynamic Discs Open in Emporia, middle of June, a couple weeks off there. Des Moines Challenge, the Preserve after that, to end of June, beginning of July. The Discmania Open will be a silver event out in Prince Edward Island in Canada. Very highly regarded course over there. So we'll see what the attendance looks like there, because a lot of players will be heading over to Europe for the European swing. The PCS Sula Open is back this year as an elite rather than a silver, and then we will have the European Open middle of July in Nokia. Ledgestone Open, an Elite Plus event beginning of August. Idlewild, August 11th through 13th in Kentucky. And then we get into the playoffs again. There will be a playoff structure for the Pro Tour once again. The DGLO, the Great Lakes Open, middle of August will be the first playoff event. There'll be a Silver Series, the Rochester Flying Disc Open, which is likely to get renamed to the American Flying Disc Open, which is the original name of the tournament. It's the longest running tournament in PDGA history, 50 years this year. So it will be on the silver. Then we'll get two Worlds. It's going to be up in Vermont this year. Everybody knows that. We've been talking about that for a while. Josh has his tickets. And then we go back to, we go down to MVP, just the same as this year, Vermont to Massachusetts. That will be the second playoff event again in 2023. Then we'll have U.S. Women's in North Carolina. And then a week and a half after that, USDGC and Throw Pink. And then 4 days after that, the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. So the end of the season is a doozy. So that is your schedule. They have not announced if they're going to do wraparound tournaments again. Of course, we have 2 Silver Series coming up after the end of this, USDGC and Pro Tour Championship this year that count towards next year's points. So that's the schedule. Josh, initial reactions to hearing this 2023 schedule.
Yeah, I think my biggest, probably gripe is the best way to put it, is with this new Elite Plus, because they're just finding ways to create these like varying classifications to the point that they don't really mean anything. Like the playoff events are scattered throughout. I mean, there are 2 tournaments in between each playoff event. So you've got events all over the place for the playoffs, which I didn't really like when they were back to back this season, and now I really don't like them for next season. But then they throw in this Elite Plus distinction for the Portland Open and Ledgestone Open, which indicates a increased amount of media, that they will be 4-day tournaments. Is there anything else? I think it also talked a little bit about purse. Yeah, bigger purse and elevated spectator experience. That's what the DGPT said was going to be a part of this ESPN Plus. I don't know, like why it's getting to the point that you have just so many distinctions.
That you just said ESPN Plus.
ESPN.
You mean Elite Plus?
Elite Plus. I was looking at your article.
I hope that these tournaments will be on ESPN Plus.
Yes, I was looking at your article when I said that, which mentioned that they may try and get it onto ESPN at those events because of their increased status.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think it's funny what you key in on, like the Elite Plus distinction. It doesn't really mean anything, right? It's not like those are worth more to players. It just means like they are trying to use this as a way of sort of, I think, going to outside media, national media, and being like, these are Elite Plus events. But it's obviously like getting a little muddy to have Silver and then Elite Plus, but Elite Plus doesn't really mean anything in particular to the tour itself, right? Because Silver, they're not worth as much. By the way, they're going to be worth more this year.
Yeah.
So they're increasing the points. Now, they haven't said by how much. I would probably guess 50%. They're probably also going to count more tournaments towards your total. So we'll see how those end up being weighted. I mean, arguably it could be 75%. You could go 75, 100 for Elite, 125 for playoffs, and then 150 for majors. That would be logical. So we'll see what they do. But it's there's like these different statuses that don't necessarily connote much. Like Silver, okay, I get it, right? It's like these aren't as important. We don't do as much with them, but they also are downgraded in terms of the actual value of the event to players, both the money and the points,
which I feel is appropriate.
So Elite Plus, it's like, okay, we have more money, which that's true. I mean, particularly with Ledgestone, Portland too, but Portland didn't let's go back and look at our purse watch. Portland was a highly paying tournament this year. Mm-hmm. It was 85,000 total purse, but that came in behind D-Glow, behind Des Moines, behind GMC, behind MVP.
Yes.
So I don't know. I get your point.
I wonder if Portland, because remember, Portland is the one that had the Epic Games sponsorship. I wonder if that's something they're not telling us right now, is that they may have secured a multi-year or have discussions with somebody in Portland who they're expecting to fork over a lot of cash.
Yeah, and again, I think it's something that you can sell potentially to an ESPN type, like, hey, we're going to give you this package of our Elite Plus events, which, Portland has potential to be like the biggest stop on tour in terms of spectators and fanfare and all that stuff. I mean, it's just such a great market for disc golf. And, Glendevere is a sweet course, and there's just a lot of opportunity there.
I guess the point in summary is like, if every event has a unique distinction, then the distinctions lose their weight in terms of their value of meaning anything to me. And that's like the playoff events felt that way a little bit this year, and now they especially feel that way because it's so, man, I hate this playoff format so much.
Well, I mean, I think the idea of having events at the end of the season that count for more points is somewhat compelling, but calling them playoffs, as we've discussed, it loses the meaning of the word playoff when there's nothing really on the line.
Right.
Like,
right.
yes, there are some players at the margins who are going to be in or out, and that's sort of an interesting discussion to have. But that would be an interesting discussion regardless of whether these were playoff events or not. Mm-hmm. And so the cut lines they're too generous to make it very interesting. So anyway, yes. I don't know. Maybe they can improve on that. But again, I think it's mostly about like almost like external branding. But it just I'm sort of surprised they stuck with the playoff nomenclature just because it had no meaning this year.
Right. Right. If I could offer a suggestion, it would be to scratch the playoff nomenclature and just call all 4 of those events Elite Plus and make them all 125.
And bonus them? I don't have a problem with that.
That way, Portland Open is exciting in May. It's just like Champions Cup, right? We get the 4th major to really incentivize players and like, because that adds some good structure and value early to the season. Do the same thing with the Portland Open so that in May, there's a tournament that's worth 125 and you cannot drop. You do the same thing for Ledgestone, which is late August. And then your last 2 events, whatever you want to make them for your other Elite Plus events, then it's also the 125. But then I don't care where they're at in the season. You can move them around. It doesn't have to be the same events, whatever, distinctions you want to make and requirements for that. That's fine with me, but just call them all Elite Plus events and just get rid of the playoff nomenclature. I think that's the solution to this mess.
I think it's interesting. I mean, because Deagle is going to be 4 rounds this year. Was it 4 rounds? Was it 4 rounds in 2022?
I don't think so.
I feel like most of the single course tournaments are only 3 rounds, but they're going to extend it out because it's a playoff event now. So I actually kind of like that, Josh. It's like we have these ones that are worth more points because then giving it a different name means something. The same way Silver sort of downgrades it, Elite Plus upgrades it in terms of points. Yes. They're all 4 rounds. They all have fat payouts, and you have these opportunities throughout the season to like get these extra points.
Right.
I think that's smart. I think I want to back up and just talk about, and we can talk about the changes. So actually, let me talk about the changes. And then I have a point that I want to make.
Yeah.
Here's the changes. New tournaments this year. The Open at Austin. It's going to be during South by Southwest in Austin, which could go great or could go poorly. Because obviously you'll have a lot of people, a lot of opportunity to do music things and all of the fanfare of Austin, but it's also going to be expensive. People who live in Austin are like, don't come here during South by Southwest. It's already a zoo. So we'll see. I can totally see the appeal of that. Mm-hmm. That is basically the Open at Belton being moved to Austin. Same TDs, same leadership team. They're just saying, okay, we're going from this course in Belton, which I guess everybody decided this is not up to snuff. And they're going to take it and play it in Austin. Now, we don't know the courses yet. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. And then we have the Blue Ridge Championships. It's a silver. That North Cove course is awesome, and I think this could be an Elite Series stop long term. Discmania Open, another silver in Canada. And then the American Flying Disc Open in Rochester. So 3 new silvers, 1 new Elite Series. You have PCS Sula and Music City moving up to Elite status. You have Texas States getting dropped down to silver status and removed from tour. Well, Open at Belton, sort of moved/removed. Open at Tallahassee, Masters Cup, Mid-America Open, and the Butler County Disc Golf Classic, all silvers this year, all not on the schedule for next year. Masters Cup being removed means that right now there are 0 tournaments in Southern California, which to me, I think maybe they just need to figure it out with Masters Cup, because I just think it's like totally unacceptable not to have a tournament of any kind in Southern California. Like It's one of the biggest metros in the country. So much history in disc golf. You have to have a tournament down there. Whether you want to do Goat Hill or you want to do Masters Cup or you want to do Wintertime Open or you want to whatever. Find something to have in Southern California. I mean, this is just like a monster metro. I don't understand.
Yeah.
So then, okay, sorry. Before you continue, I have a bigger point to make, which is this enough change from 2022? I mean, I feel like we've heard for years that like we're going to have all these changes to the Elite Series coming soon. And well, now we have had basically the same schedule with minor adjustments at the margins for, 3 years. I mean, really since 2020 obviously was affected by COVID, but like the structure from 2020 has now persisted into 2021, 2022, and it's going to look basically the same in 2023. I have to say I'm a little surprised at how little change there is to the overall schedule. A lot of these events are great events that deserve to be on tour, but there's not a lot of new stuff. Like, again, the only actually brand new Elite Series event is the Open at Austin. That's it. Everything else has already been on tour. Mm-hmm. And everything, all the other new ones are silvers, but we're not seeing silvers really coming up onto the Elite Series.
Getting promoted.
Yeah. So yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm surprised, Josh, about how sort of samey the tour is going to feel next year.
I agree, but I also kind of understand, because when you look at these events and you look at the work that they've done, think about the efforts that the Des Moines Challenge made and how unique it was for them to get to that payout level. If I asked you what would be easier, to get Jonesboro Open up to that same payout level, or to go find a brand new A tier or pull a Silver Series up and get them to the Des Moines level, the answer is going to be Jonesboro, right? Or any event, right? Just pick and choose. The events that have long established Elite Series events have the kind of marketing and branding infrastructure to achieve the kind of growth that the Disc Golf Pro Tour is looking at. And so when you look at the two options and competing priorities, I would argue in some cases, between purse, sponsorship, and branding versus novelty and innovation, it makes sense why. I don't know if I agree with it. I mean, I personally would love to see some innovation to the Elite Series, but it makes sense to me why they would prioritize these events that have long been on the tour.
Sure, I totally agree with that. I just think that, like, there's not enough change. Like, yeah. I'm expecting 85% of the tour to be the same every single year. That's, there's a bunch of tournaments that you're never going to remove from the tour, and they should be on there forever. But I just feel like I'm a little, like, when all the change is just happening at the silver level, tournaments that people simply do not pay attention to as much, do not watch as much, can't watch as much, then, like, what is the change that's happening here, right? We have almost none.
Yeah.
So I would like to see some more chances taken on the Elite Series. And if the silvers are just going to rotate every year, that doesn't feel like enough shakeup to me to keep things feeling fresh and interesting. I'm a little surprised we don't have any Florida tournaments. The Texas Swing is 3 tournaments again, Josh. We have back-to-back Waco and Austin, 90 minutes apart, like 4 days apart. Like, I almost wonder if, like, people are worried about hurting feelings, to be honest. Like, Texas is the number one state for disc golf, the most PDGA members. It deserves to have multiple tournaments, but do we really need 2 tournaments back to back, 4 days apart, 90 minutes apart? I mean, I ask you honestly, does that make sense? I don't think so. I don't think that makes sense. I think that Texas States this year is going to be in Houston. Houston is not particularly close to Waco, so having like a tournament in Houston and then a tournament that's accessible to Austin and Dallas, which Waco is, makes sense to me. But to have 3 tournaments again in Texas, are we going to be clawing our eyes out again? Because this year it was just brutal, right? Like by the time we were at Texas State, it was like, get us out of here. And so I just feel like there's just like a missed opportunities with some of these choices. I love the idea of having an Austin tournament, but then drop Waco this year. Like this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like take the chance to be like, no Waco because we're doing this Austin thing and we're taking the chance. Mm-hmm. But instead we have this long slog in Texas again. I don't know about it.
It's so funny. Well, you said be honest, and I'm very honest about how I feel about the Texas swing. I mean, I don't usually hold back on the Texas swing. When I saw Texas State championships got downgraded, I was actually kind of excited. I was like, okay, good. Like the course was crap this year. It needs to be like something's got to change there. So they downgraded to silver. I'm like, this is exactly how the schedule should function. If courses aren't meeting up to standards, they get downgraded or removed. We introduced the Open at Austin, which new course. I'm excited about this. And then I realized that they had moved Texas State's out to Houston. And I was like, hold up. Why didn't you just move it to Austin and leave that the Elite Series and have the Open at Austin be the Silver Series, or Waco be the Silver Series, the Open at Austin be the Elite Series? And Houston, like you said, it didn't make sense. They're like, oh yeah, this tournament really didn't perform, so we're gonna stick 2 Elite Series within a stone's throw of each other, and then relegate the Silver Series to the coast. And I'm like, what? It doesn't make any sense. But I've said this before, and I will say it again because I know TDs would not like this. I mean, no TD is going to advocate for their tournament to go on a rotating schedule.
Right.
Obviously. But I'll say it again. I think the schedule should be built up. You have Elite Plus. They are your permanent events. MVP, Ledgestone, Portland, whatever events you decide are your permanent events, make those Elite Plus. They never move. They're 4 rounds. They are always on the schedule. You then have the rest of your tournaments made up by groupings of tournaments. So in Texas, you have 3 tournaments, 2 Elite Series, 1 Silver Series. Every third year, you get to run your event. You know it's coming. You know what year you're going to have it. You have that projected forward. And you start fundraising at an appropriate time and planning at an appropriate time, but you've got 3 years to make course changes. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. If you want to do like California, for example, pick a couple events that are in California and have them rotate around. If it's OTB and Masters Cup and whatever other third event you want to do, there's a cycle. And then you could cycle regions as well. If you broke the country up into regions, every third year you introduce a Rocky Mountain tournament, and then so that there's just that constant cycling of events, but it's done in a way that is planned, and TDs know out in advance this is what their plan is. And then you have a couple of like TDs on staff who can help pick an A tier and elevate it to a silver event if something falls through.
Yeah. I think the challenge of what you're describing, I mean, it makes sense in a lot of ways, but I think the challenge is that, let's say, I run a tournament in Texas, and sure, this year it's not my year, so I don't even run it.
Yep.
Well, how do you keep the momentum? How do you, I've talked to TDs who talked about how hard it can be to, have a year off and then try to come back and do it. Like, sure, mm-hmm, you have more time in theory, but you also don't run the event. You forget little things. You have to reassemble a team. It's just some of that stuff's pretty challenging.
Sure. To
not have the continuity of year after year after year after year, which lends credence to the concept and what we're seeing. By the way, I mean, just broadly, the tour makes a lot of sense, right? Geographically, it makes sense. I think they've done a nice job of tweaking the schedule around Champions Cup as things go out east and then back west. It's more like there's more to do. You have this new North Carolina Silver Series. The big grind is going to be going from Champions Cup to Jonesboro to OTB. So you have, Champions Cup to Jonesboro is just 5 days away, so it's like back-to-back weekends, and then you have a long, like a 2-week break basically to OTB. So it's like, okay, we're going back all the way across the country. So take your driving time, make it happen. You have all this time to get out to California, and that's kind of one of your big breaks in the tour. it's worth noting that you also have a long break between Portland and then DDO. That's a pretty long break. May 28th to June 16th. So like 2.5 weeks, basically, with no tournament in there at all. So interesting to see. Maybe we'll see a Silver Series pop up in that slot somewhere, or everybody's just going to get a little break.
Hey, can I add one thing real fast?
Go for it.
To my cycling idea.
Okay.
The tournaments that are not on tour that year are Pro Tour affiliated A tiers, and that's how you earn your Pro Tour card. At
the A tiers that are like, yeah.
So let's say this year is Waco.
Sure.
And the Open at Austin is not. So it's just an A tier, but it's a Pro Tour affiliated. So they get some sort of support, help from the Pro Tour. They can still market themselves as a Pro Tour affiliated event, right? They get that momentum like you're talking about. But what it is open registration, and you get points from Pro Tour affiliated events that count towards a tour card for the next year.
Well, they need to create that.
They do.
Like, we're still waiting to hear about how they're going to do that. There is no mechanism yet. And it seems to me that Silver is moving even further away from being that concept, because now they're increasing the amount of points that it's worth. They're encouraging touring professionals to go to those tournaments. Yep. So, Josh, you're like, let's add another distinction. We need an A tier. But it would be an interesting concept to have A tier tournaments that requires a lot of cooperation with the PDGA. That's the other thing. Tons. Because the PDGA sets the A tier schedules.
Yep.
So not that can't happen. I mean, it certainly can. I would love for there to be tournaments where like top touring pros are just basically told you're not welcome. The silvers stay the silvers. You play those, but these other A tiers that are like DGPT approved or whatever, that's the kinds of tournaments you can go to earn points in order to qualify onto the Pro Tour for the following season. They have to figure something out for that. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about here, Josh, the end of the season is very crowded. Thank goodness for Champions Cup being in April and giving us a tournament, a major at that time of year. Because we go Champions Cup in April, and then we have European Open in July, and then we have a lot of big important tournaments starting in middle of August through October. So we have the playoff events. So we have D-Glow in August, Worlds end of August, start of September, MVP playoff event middle September, U.S. Women's week after MVP, then USDGC beginning of October, and then Pro Tour Championship middle of October. So that's going to be a crazy grind, especially for the FPO, because they're going to go D-Glow August 17th to 20th. 10 days later is Worlds. Then you have 11 days until MVP, so there's a weekend off. And then 4 days after that is U.S. Women's in North Carolina. So that's going to be crazy because they're going to have to drive from Massachusetts, North Carolina, and probably only have 3 days to prep. So hopefully they don't have to play too many courses. Because then you'll have U.S. Women's and then, throw pink, for however you want to weigh that. We'll talk about that later today. It's just going to be a very intense end of the season with kind of like all the marbles on the line. We talk about like player of the year race. It's going to be impossible to have those conversations until the beginning of October, probably.
Yeah. I'm pretty disappointed by MVP to U.S. Women's being only a week apart.
What am I supposed to do?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a clean solution, but I think it's the only major that has an elite series the weekend before.
That's probably true. Now PCS Sula is right before European, although that has a little bit more logic to it.
Yeah. But fair point. Like there is one other one that is better, but it's just, if you're an FPO player and you pull this up, like it's just what a disappointment. if I don't know what these courses are for the U.S. Women's Championship. I know they're in Burlington, North Carolina, when I looked at the schedule. I don't know if these are courses that are well known, if they're regularly played.
They are. They've been used at past majors, like amateur majors. I'm forgetting exactly. They're solid courses.
And I believe that. My question is, how well are they known, right? How many of these women have played these courses?
Yeah, that I don't know. They haven't been on tour in a long time.
Right. So that'll be interesting to see. I wonder if during our spring like from Music City Open, Blue Ridge Championship at North Cove Champions Cup, I wonder if like an FPO player would consider going, instead of Blue Ridge Championship, going to Burlington and just playing those courses to get in a little bit of extra practice for US Women's. It's that back half, like you said, is just so crowded. There's no breathing room.
I mean, that's just how it's going to be. With USDGC where it is and the Pro Tour Championship where it is, that's always going to be a couple of huge events at the end of the year, which, of course, you expect that. It's the end of the season. But with Worlds happening in Vermont and taking the place of what is typically GMC, that's obviously just going to heavily backweight the calendar. And the fact that you also have U.S. Women's there that year, that's the tough part, I think.
Yeah.
Because that's just a lot for FPO. But
it is.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Players are going to be stressed out, I'm sure. It's a lot of courses and important tournaments to have to worry about right at the end of the year.
It's going to be about staying healthy and just being able to compete effectively during that time.
Again, broadly, I think, the structure here makes sense. The big, when you look at the map, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can take a look here at the map. You'll see Mountain West, empty. Nothing in the Rockies.
Yeah.
And sorry, Josh. And nothing, as I mentioned, nothing in Southern California, nothing in Florida. And I would also love to see a tournament in what I would call the Northeast Corridor region. So you think about that DC to Boston corridor. There's a lot of people that live there. Mm-hmm. And there's not really a tournament close by. Now, obviously, if you live in Boston, you have MVP. But if you live in Philly, New York, Washington, D.C., there's really just not much around. And I think it would be really nice for them to figure out a tournament to put in that slot somewhere. And it's hard because it's a very urban sort of stretch of the country where there's not a lot of disc golf courses. There's zero disc golf in New York City. So I'm realistic, but I also think that trying to find a course in and around Philadelphia, New Jersey area should be a priority for the tour just because of the population center. Same as Southern California and Florida too. Florida has a ton of PDGA tournaments, a ton of PDGA members, and I think it probably deserves to have an elite series at this point. And I'm sort of surprised we don't have one.
Especially because we had Silver Series in Florida this year. It was like, oh, okay, here's a couple Silver Series. Which one's going to get the upgrade? Psych. And then, yeah.
You out. Yeah. So what's your number one wish list item, Josh? If you could rearrange the schedule in some way.
I'd put a tournament in Denver. Because
here's a real question for you.
Sure.
Is there a course that you feel like would work in around the Mountain West?
I don't know. I have not played. I mean, Utah, obviously, there's been the Utah Open before. Worlds was held there. I know that the Fort could and does can accommodate that tournament, but I am not sure. I would love for our Denver listeners, because to me, Denver makes the most sense. I know there are
makes the most sense.
Tons of courses there. There's an airport. Lots of reasons to me that Denver makes a ton of sense when you're going from Portland Open to DDO. That you just have a stop in Denver. I don't know the courses well enough in Denver, and I'd be interested to know if there are any that are good enough to host those. So Denver listeners, please reach out. But when I look at, where I'm at, and I'm not even in Denver, Denver's further away, but from me, I am about a 10 to 12 hour drive to the closest Elite Series event, or even Silver Series, right? Like if I wanted to go to Oregon, I'm looking at about a 12-hour drive to get there. And something in Denver is there are lots of easy flights to Denver. It's a little bit less time, and I think it's a good centrally located for that gap in the middle that represents Rocky Mountain disc golf. So that would be my wish list.
Makes
very
a lot
personally
of sense.
Self-interested.
But I mean, that's a big swath of the country that doesn't have a tournament right now. I mean, to be fair, there's also not a lot of people that live in large parts of that area of the country. But, you know, Denver is a nice big population center, and you could have a great event there. You know, you could have a music thing there there's a great, you know, beer culture there. It does feel like Denver should be like a spot that the Pro Tour is thinking about. Okay, how do we get a course good enough here to host a Pro Tour event? And that, you know, there are some spots where like maybe Denver just doesn't have a course. Like I just glanced through UDisc really quick. It doesn't really look like there's a course in Denver that would be sufficient. You know, it's pretty flat in Denver. You're in the valley of the mountains. Yeah. So I'm sure you could make one if you've got some private property. There's plenty of foothills areas that would have like a really nice blend of like open park style and then also mountainous. But, you know, you may need to invest in property there, but that's obviously a long-term thing. So broadly, I think we can expect to see a similar season to last year. And hey, the season has been really good. So I think you get a lot of great tournaments on the tour again. So I think it's more doubling down on what we've seen the last couple of years, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the Silver Series schedule that's yet to come out. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got some talk about Throw Pink and USDGC. The Monday qualifying is all done, so we'll talk about who made it in. And then we are also going to go inside the circle. Haven't done it in a while, so looking forward to that. Stay with us. It's The Upshot. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Make sure you check out Pound's Custom Pack Builder, where you can customize every aspect of the bag, from the upper fabric, the lower fabric, the zippers, the sliders, the cords. You can get an Octothorpe, an Octahall, a toolbox, or even a Carlton in custom options. And stay tuned, Rufus Customs coming soon. Go to PoundDiscGolf.com to check out the Custom Pack Builder today. Welcome back to The Upshot. So we are 2 days away from the start of the U.S. Disc Golf Championships and the Throw Pink Women's Disc Golf Championship. And really quickly, Monday qualifying tournament took place yesterday. And you had 5 players get in for MPO and 2 for FPO. Your qualifiers... In MPO, there was a 4-person playoff for the final 2 spots. And it was cool because Disc Golf Network was doing like a little live preview show, and they caught the end and they were able to broadcast the entirety of this playoff so you could see the players get in. Your players in for USDGC are Ian Burchett, Joseph Anderson, Aaron Doyle, Max Regetnig, and Alex Zyros, who the last 2 qualifying in the playoff. And for the women, Paige Shue and Sarah Cunningham qualify. Wouldn't it be awesome if Paige Shue came out and won this thing?
That would be incredible. I would be very surprised to ever see a qualifier win USDGC.
I was just thinking about that watching yesterday. I was like, what a story it would be for someone to come out of qualifying and win the whole tournament. Obviously, it's extremely unlikely, but
yeah,
you have that hope. You know, you go into the tournament, you have that hope. So question, of course, that's been, I mean, they were even asking Missy Gannon about this yesterday in this little pre-show. At the end of the day, this is a major for the men. It's the U.S. Championships. It's got a ton of history. And for the women, it's an A tier that's presented as though it is sort of on par, you know, from the media perspective. as the USDGC, and there's a big trophy, and there's all included in this whole week in Rock Hill, but it's not a major. And I know how we talked last year about how it feels like it's a major, right? But it's not. So is this a problem, Josh? Do you think that this needs to change and that this should become the U.S. championships for the women as well?
I think we're going to see a very apparent problem with this structure next season, where it goes Worlds, playoff event, United States Women's Disc Golf Championships, then a break, and then USDGC and Throw Pink. I know that the U.S. Women's Championship is an important tournament for the women. I understand the history behind it. I understand the amateur side and the event that it's become. But we've talked about it, and like you mentioned and highlight exactly that this tournament is marketed and built and hyped as essentially a major for FPO and its importance. Next season, I believe that the U.S. Women's Championship is going to pale next to the Throw Pink Women's Championship, especially when they are in such close proximity to each other on the season. And when you have this perception and influence of the Throw Pink Women's Championship overshadowing the U.S. Women's Championship, it's going to become very clear, I think, that the Throw Pink Women's Championship is, despite its limited history, been able to borrow the prestige that comes from USDGC and why it should be the fourth major for the women's side.
This is such a tough challenge, I think, because you have this U.S. women's tournament that travels around, that's a celebration of women's disc golf, that's held on a weekend with no men's tournaments. It gets the full focus of everybody. That's the only time of year, really, that happens. And you have all of these amateur divisions all the way up to the, FA 80.
Yep.
And, it's gotten bigger and bigger, the tournament. And yet, at the same time, so it's like, well, what's the problem? It sounds great. The problem is that for the FPO, we are hearing from a lot of players that it's not up to snuff. Whether that's the course is not being good enough, certainly the presentation of the tournament is lacking a little bit, maybe a lot, compared to DGPT elite events and the more, USDGC and the fanfare that you see at the majors. I mean, we heard, during this year's USWDGC, we heard, this is not, it's like a glorified B tier. And that is the problem. That is the problem. Can you still serve the needs of a gigantic amateur event along with serving the needs of the touring professional FPO players who are going week in and week out to the tournaments that are, they're getting the same amenities as the men? Because there's no question that the USDGC offers more prestige and pomp and circumstance and amenities and quality of overall event than what we're seeing at the U.S. Women's Championship, which is being run by different people every year, often in communities that are not running big popular tournaments every season. So it's not like it's really like the TD's fault or anything like that, but the quality of the event isn't matching the men's U.S. Championship. And that feels like a problem. I understand, though, there are many FPO players who feel this way too, that you don't want to remove this really important women's tournament that gets the spotlight, that brings all of these women together, that draws AMs in because they're going to be playing alongside the top pros. But my opinion, I think that you need to find a way to keep the spirit of that event and have an event like that has a big FPO presence, that isn't a major, and you need to move the U.S. championship to Winthrop for the women. That's what I want to see. Because I think that you can get a lot of the benefits. And heck, you can make it a major for the AMs. Make it your U.S. amateur championships and have there be an FPO field there. And how do you get that? Well, have a big purse. Offer opportunities for the FPO players to have like appearance bonuses or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could figure this out and even have it be an important event. Like make it an elite series, make it, give it some kind of status that still allows it to be an important tournament for the women, right? Like put it on the Disc Golf Pro Tour and you give it some different name for the women, but it is concurrent with the U.S. Amateur Women's Championships. Nothing wrong with that. And have it be women's only that weekend. I think that'd be a great idea. But the U.S. major for FPO would be better served by being in Rock Hill. It's just, these are two separate events at this point where it's like the FPO you can't plan a tournament for a million amateur divisions and also have it be optimized for the professionals. It's just like almost impossible at this point.
One of the big things that I find so interesting is that we've talked about this season about access to pros, the ability as a spectator to get my discs signed and to interact with pros, and the way that's being increasingly commercialized. And we've talked about the fact that this is going to be a real problem that disc golf is going to have to keep in mind, because we've been so used to having unfettered access to pros because we play next to them and they just show up to our tournaments. But that's not the case anymore. And so we have to, like, spectators have to understand that when you show up for an event, and a Pro Tour event, that they are there to compete, you are there to spectate, and if there are opportunities designated for that interaction, then great. But if not, like, you need to respect that. And I think of other professional sports, and I know we're not there yet, but imagine if you told Serena Williams that instead of the US Open, she has another major, but it's a Pro-Am event where there's just, the 10% of the field are the professional women's players, and 90% are just amateurs who are there, but who are excited to be there because they get to play with Serena. There can be an argument in lots of sports about the need for that celebration of the women's side of that sport, the attention on the women's side of that sport, a weekend dedicated to the women. But when you compare that with the cost of the professionalization of a major and use that major as kind of like the shackle to keep FPO at this event, I think you're going to receive increasing amounts of hostility from FPO players, which is already occurring. You're going to have TDs who don't want to run this event because they know that they're just going to be the topic of criticism in social media for months because of the lack of FPO attention and the professionalization of the FPO side. It's creating an unnatural relationship between a side of the game that needs to be broken off and be professionalized. And the longer they stay together, the more tension and friction you're going to see around the PDGA, around those tournaments, and the FPO side of the field. I think it's time that gets moved to Rock Hill as well.
Yeah, I think the alternative is to really commit to making the existing U.S. women's tournament a lot more polished. Like that's the other option you have, is for somebody being hired at the PDGA on their majors crew, right? They hire people to run the world championships, and they hire somebody, maybe a couple people to run the U.S. women's championship. And you have to go in there and you have to elevate the quality of all of the parts of the event. Remember the caddy book? The caddy book? I mean, it was a comedy. It was a comedy, but that's the kind of little detailed things. Like, it doesn't, it's like, well, whatever. It's the caddy book. Who cares? But like, it's a joke. Like, you can't have those kinds of things. And we never see anything like that for any of the majors for the men, ever. And that's where I have a problem. I understand the U.S. women's tournament has history too, but it doesn't have the kind of prestige, right? It has felt like a side note, a throwaway major, and that's not right. That's not right. So you have a team in Rock Hill that is now clearly willing, after a long time of really not being willing, to execute a women's tournament at a high level on the Winthrop Arena course. And I think the course is challenging for the women, but it's not brutal, right? It's not like the Beast,
it's appropriate,
where they're playing the MPO layout and getting crushed. Yeah, it's appropriately challenging. Like, you can take big numbers, but it's also, scoreable. And so I think, and of course it has all of the amenities of everything. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, the U.S. Women's is the one time of year where it's, the women's competition is not the undercard to the men's competition. And I get that argument. I do. But tell me that it doesn't feel like an undercard. Like, if I'm an FPO player, obviously I'm speaking as a dude. So, like, take it or leave it if you want to listen to what I have to say here. But if I'm an FPO, I would rather be at Winthrop and have 5,000 people around watching than be at the U.S. Women's Championship, where it's like there's not a ton of spectators and it's not run as a professional level major championship. I mean, I think that's an easy call, even if there are fewer people watching my card than watching the men's lead card. There's still a lot of people there, and I feel like FPO is more popular than it's ever been. And that has been in part two things. Number one, the media coverage being split off from the men has been just an enormous benefit to being able to follow the stories of the division. And that's huge. But I do think it actually helps to have it be a singular tour that travels together, and you have people get invested in both storylines. So I don't actually see that necessarily as a downside, because right now, the weekend where it's just the women isn't being treated seriously enough. So anyway, it's going to be weird this week, because we're like having all of this stuff being equal between the men and the women, but one's a major and one's not. It's just as awkward as it was last year.
And at that U.S. women's event, I mean, like you talked about paying an appearance fee where like the FPO score keeps for the lead card, and they do clinics, and they do so many events that would get you more meaningful interaction than FPO players who are there trying to play a major.
I 100% think it could work. It would take some thinking about how to do it, and it's probably some cooperation with the Pro Tour and the PDGA, but I think it's a solvable problem to have that event maintain a lot of its characteristics while giving the FPO the opportunity to have the stage that is Winthrop.
Yep.
So let us know your thoughts. Upshot at ultiworld.com. Always happy to hear from you. And there's a op-ed up on Ultiworld Disc Golf from Matt Thompson about this topic. He too thinks that the women's championship should move to Rock Hill and has some different thoughts on that. So take a look. Now it's time to go inside the circle. It's been like months since we've gone inside the circle. Josh, take it away.
Yeah, first up, Nikko has appealed his suspension and has been reduced down from 9 months to 6 months following that appeal. The probation period has been extended to 18 months. So those 3 months that were going to be on suspension did move out to the probationary period. It means that he's going to be able to compete after February 8th, which makes him eligible to begin at the season opener at the Las Vegas Challenge. Charlie, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think this was handled just about exactly right, to be honest. I think when the initial, when it first happened, when the incident happened and Nikko blows up at the rules official, it's like, this is totally unacceptable. The PDGA needs to come down hard on this. And they did. And in fact, I actually felt like, 9 months is a lot given that it's going to not only completely take him out of competition for the rest of this season, but also heavily affect his season next year, including missing the first major. And they did exactly what you would expect, right? You set the guideline there. You have an appeal process where Nikko can kind of like make a case as to why he should be allowed to play sooner than that. And then you reduce it to 6 months, which is still a long time, right? It's still a long suspension. And yet now he'll be able to come back. Now, I think I've seen a lot of people saying like, oh, PGA is so soft, so weak, like Nikko should never play again. I mean, people just hate Nikko and want to see him like never get to play, which, I'm sorry, no matter how you feel about Nikko, that's not how things work. Like, we don't just put people in jail forever for ultimately what's, it was a mistake. He did something that was embarrassing, but it's not like he killed somebody. Like, he should be able to play professional disc golf again. This is his career. So I think this is handled just about exactly right. This is how an appeal process should work. They softened it without making it too much softer. And it's still 2 years of, if you do it again, then you really get hammered. So like, if he does something like this again, I mean, ban him for 4 or 5 years. I don't care. Like, at that point, you're not learning the lesson that you say that you're learning. So, but as it stands for this one incident and the way that this has been handled, I think the disciplinary committee did a good job here.
Eagle McMahon has announced that he's dropping USDGC and going to end his 2022 season. He is feeling good, and he's talked about the fact that he wants to just continue to have a productive offseason in preparing for next year. This does mean he also is ruling himself out for the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. If ending his season for 2022, that spot is not going to be taken by Eagle. Then we'll go to I'd have to go back and double check.
Jake Hebenheimer. We'll get
Jake Hebenheimer. We get the Hebenheimer shovel again. Let's go.
He's going to shovel his way to a Pro Tour Championship, baby.
That'd be crazy. So that is it for Eagle. Honestly, not shocked per se. I expected him to play, but I think it's really good that Eagle's prioritizing his health, and I hope he comes back healthy next season.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I was pretty sure he was going to play USDGC and then maybe skip the Pro Tour Championship because that's just been what he's done, right? He's played the majors this season. And I think it shows a lot of maturity for him to say, you know what? I'm just going to sit it out, and I'm not going to take the risk of additional issues, and I'm going to just extend. Because you think about this, right? This is like when baseball teams that are out of the postseason hunt shut down their pitchers. It's like... What value is he really going to get out of playing USDGC? It's a chance to win another major. It would be a great story if he won it, the same was at European Open. What an amazing story for this year. But like, it's not really going to advance his career. It's not really going to change. It's not going to win him Player of the Year. It's not going to. It's just a tournament. It's just an important tournament. But by not playing, you now get yourself a massive time off to get healthy. And I think that's just so smart. Him playing European Open, like, he's the face of Discmania, and then he won it. What an incredible thing. But like, how are you going to top that? You're not, right? You go over there to Europe, you sign your discs, you're the kids love you. They just think you're the best. And it's this big Discmania event, and USDGC is an Innova event. It's, like, obviously you want to play, but I just think it shows a lot of mental strength and increasing maturity from Eagle to say, you know what, I actually feel good right now. I don't want to jeopardize that. I want to go into this offseason and have an extended time, right? All the way from August through to next February, where he can get healthy. And hopefully he can, and he can be back at full strength and playing all of 2023.
With USDGC comes the U.S. Distance Championships. The U.S. Distance champions for this year, David Wiggins Jr. at 698 feet. So cool to see him still throwing discs like that. Notably, Albert Tom in, I think it was a preliminary round, threw a 710. but
Crazy.
did not in finals. So that's not the farthest throw of the day, but still impressive to see David Wiggins Jr. winning that event. And in FPO, Ella Hansen wins it at 552 feet. It's notable after that win, she put on Twitter and asked, should I be going for the official distance record? Official distance record right now is Jennifer Allen at 570 feet.
Yeah. So let's put that into context. Ella Hansen showed up for a distance competition at USDGC and casually almost threw the world record. I mean, I think it's just a matter of time. Like, whenever Ella decides that she wants to go out to the desert with a tailwind and just absolutely launch bombs, she's going to set the new record. She's probably going to throw it over 600 feet. And shout out to Jen Allen for being, one of the longest throwers on tour for a decade. But Ella is the new queen of the division in this category. So I think it's just a matter of time. I mean, incredible. 552. That's
so far.
That's so far. Very impressive stuff.
Final Inside the Circle, Paul Macbeth's European Open caddy, Eunice Karanoka, got flown in to caddy for Macbeth at USDGC. He had talked about this, that there was unfinished business and that they would be bringing him in for a major sometime in the United States. Such a cool story. I love this story. I love this one so much. And I hope that we get to see Eunice at more events and more majors that Paul Macbeth flies him over for.
This is so wild. I mean, I also just think it's amazing. Like, Paul creates his own narrative to motivate him, right? He's like, we have unfinished business. It's like, dude, you just won Worlds. What unfinished business do you have? Okay, you didn't win European Open, but I just think it's great. I think this is a very funny thing for him to fly somebody in to carry his bag. But you know what? Whatever feels good, right? Players, so much of it is about mental. Obviously, Macbeth played probably his best disc golf of the season at European Open. Let's not forget that. I know he won Worlds, but he wasn't playing as well as he was playing at European. He just wasn't. Eagle just happened to play better. I mean, that was one of the craziest things that we've seen in a long time. The way that Eagle and Macbeth, they separated. Eagle beat Kevin Jones in third place by 17 strokes.
I forgot it was that.
Are you kidding me, dude?
Gosh.
And Macbeth played incredible. He averaged one of the highest ratings ever at a major with not winning. So it's pretty remarkable, and I think it's hilarious that he brought him in, and what an opportunity for Eunice to come and get to go to USDGC and carry Macbeth's bag. Awesome.
That's it for Inside the Circle.
All right, and that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you first thing bright and early on Thursday for our USDGC and Throw Pink Women's Disc Golf Championship preview show. I got a couple mulligans to get to about the course, mostly about a couple of slight changes that we didn't get right, and some notes about the previous layout, because the caddy book that I thought was last year's caddy book, because of the way the website was written, was not. It was from 2 years ago. So a couple little tweaks, but we'll get to all that on Thursday. And for Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. We'll talk to you then.